On the podcast today, we're talking to Lynda McInnes, principal of Dara School, Australia's, I believe, still the only gifted school in Australia, currently
Yes.
going from reception to grade 12. And today's theme is all about, I guess, policy and legislation, but I think what that is really about is change. And you have definitely had to deal with a lot of policy and legislation and change. Welcome.
Yes, I've aged. You know, I'm really only 25. I feel 100 at the moment. But yeah, when we first started the journey, it was back in 2013. And I look back now and think that is a long time ago.
Yeah.
It took us probably 4 years to get into a building. And it wasn't the policy, it was trying to find a building. It's the hardest part in all of this journey.
So the hardest part of creating a school for gifted kids was finding a building.
It's the building. It wasn't the policy.
Yeah.
It wasn't the rules and regulations, because if you actually read the rules and regulations, they're very clear what you've got to do.
Yeah.
So you go and do it.
So it was a matter of just pulling the documentation together. I mean, although I imagine that was a lot of work.
There's probably around about 30 policies that you've got to write. You've got to write your curriculum for each year level to prove that you can write curriculum. You've got to make sure, you know, health and safety, all of those kinds of rules are there. But it is this, like when you pick up the application form, you could actually just use it as a checklist.
Yeah.
You know, the guideline now for the South Australian starting a school is very much a guideline document with 3 clear criteria, and within those criteria, you know, these are the sorts of things that you should have. And if you actually sit down and look at it, one is around about learning and well-being, the other one is around, you know, the teaching, and the other part is good governance. So the governance is 1/3 of this big document.
Yeah.
So, you know, and none of us knew about what is governance.
Yeah.
We didn't know, you know, what is a constitution, where do you, and that was the hardest, was setting up governance structure. As teachers and parents, we all know about the teaching and we knew about policy, but governance is another large document, and you also have to be financially viable.
Yeah.
So if you want to apply for funding, that's easy. Once you're registered, the next step is you click on a button, fill out a form, prove you've got all of the documentation, and you can register. I mean, I made it
sound very simple,
but it's a lot of hard work for each one of those 3 criteria. And then, you know, getting federal funding and state funding, you know, is another level again. But that part you can't apply for until the day the school opens.
Oh, okay. Well, that's a bit interesting.
Yes. So
the day one, you've got to open and then apply for funding.
Yeah.
That feels a little bit, I would be a basket of nerves at that point.
Oh, we were, but we knew what we had to do, how we had to do it. We'd spoken to all of the right people, reassured these are the documents that you need.
Yeah.
And then off it goes. Yeah.
Ta-da.
Ta-da. You've got a school.
Yourself and a bunch of dedicated, interested people got together, crunched the policies for a number of years, pulled the documentation together, went through the list, ticked the boxes, opened the doors on day one, applied for state and federal funding to support the school, which not every country, that's an option. I learned recently, and I think this is correct, that in New Zealand, a private independent school doesn't get government funding. So that would be very difficult. And so day one, you open the doors, and the biggest challenge since that day has been finding an actual location for the school.
Yeah.
Because initially you weren't on your own site.
We actually operated out of a room at Flinders University whilst we wrote policies, held meetings.
Yeah.
We looked at 29 different sites over a period of probably 2 years.
That is a lot.
They have to comply with a building code for a school, and the council also has to approve it as a school. So once you move away from federal and state, your local government, so your local council, is another level of complexity. Now, they're the ones that take the longest to make any decisions. Whereas state and federal are very quick.
So it can be the luck of the draw around the council that you're in.
So we found the closer it came down the food chain, the longer your expectations, you know, you had to allow 6 months, you know, will you approve this? So then you had to start thinking creatively. So we actually went, well, we've been looking at all these buildings, let's attack it from a different point of view. What schools in the area could we actually knock on their door and say, can we hire some rooms? So that's what we did. We went door knocking on schools that we know had reduced numbers and lots of classrooms. And we were lucky enough that the third one we banged on, they went, yeah, come on in, because we can see this is benefit to us, it's benefit to you, it's a win-win situation. So we worked through the documentation, submitted the final document to the State Registration Board. They stamped it. We heard probably within a couple of weeks, yes, it's okay. And then we just started moving forward and making sure that we advertised and let everybody know. But we did that in the November. So, you know, we had December, January to get things organised, and we were just run off our feet. Lots of people were burnt out. People were not only working their own job, they were working in the evenings. People were actually taking days off work to get this happening. And we were working like Christmas Eve, New Year's Eve, just to get those doors open in time. So, you know, if we'd known that we had got this site in June, July, it would have been a little bit different. But that first year was just, I couldn't tell you what we did in the first 12 months. It was just jam-packed, full on, constant. And then we actually faced an audit at the end of the first 12 months.
That sounds like fun.
It was like, what next? You know, that was the question I always asked, what are they going to throw at me next? I feel like everything was getting in the way to stop us. But it was just normal red tape. When I actually look back now, all of the things that we faced were, you know, an audit at 12 months, and I got told I'll never be audited again in my lifetime. It was like, yes. You know, different audits, you know, like a disability audit, you know, just federal funding, whole range of audits. They just pop up and they are random. I just happen to cop them all in the same 2 years, but I'm not going to get them again in quite a while. So there were some wins. So I'm looking forward now, you know, taking that lump of coal that we had at the beginning, and it's starting to, you know, we've now moved from a local primary school where we had 2 classrooms, a cupboard and an office, to a beautiful building that, I don't know, it's got about 20 rooms. It's just beautiful. It is beautiful. You know, it was, I happened to be in the right place at the right time when someone else made a telephone call and said, what are you doing with that building? And, you know, the story just continues. And I think it is a really, and you know, we're talking about buildings quite a lot, because I know that in other states and here in Australia, there have been a number of people try to get a gifted school off the ground. And the thing that has eventually been their downfall has been the inability to find a location. It's now that I'm aware of folk in Victoria and in Western Australia, at least. I've heard of those too. And it is around finding a building. You know, if I had a couple of $1 million, I would have gone and bought a block of land and built a building, and it would have been problem solved. But considering we started with $20, what you've done is pretty amazing. We've done amazing, because a lot of it has been goodwill. There have been some donations along the way to get us over those humps, people putting money, you know, taking money out of their pockets, you know, how we constructed the board. You know, if you wanted to belong to the board, you had to pay. It were all things that probably we shouldn't have done, but we did.
Yeah.
And that was to pay for insurance.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there were little things that I look back now and think, oh dear, you know, it was interesting.
Part of the journey.
Part of the journey. And, you know, and I've cleaning out my office at home, I've come across a lot of stuff that, you know, we wrote in 2013, 2014, all the minutes from that time. I've actually brought them into school, and we're going to put them in a time capsule. So in 50 years' time, when someone said, how did the school start? They'll find this box of goodies. And, you know, because one of the researchers said to me, you know, history is really important and you've got to capture these events, you know, put them together, you know, some photos, you know, throw some photos in the box, because someone will find this treasure and will be over the moon because it is history in the making. It's like someone walked in the other day and gave us a painting of the building from 20 years ago, no, 81. So yeah, 40 years ago. Yeah. Showing my age. So from 40 years ago, and how that building looked then was completely different, you know, and that needs to go on the wall. It needs to be remembered, you know, so we're trying to collect as many of those little things as we can. Yeah, absolutely. And so you're putting the last full stops and punctuation and typos on your thesis. So you've actually done a PhD on the journey. Tell us a little bit about that. So what I've done is it's, you know, do the rules and regulations have an impact on a specialist school? You know, and that being gifted in this instance. So, you know, if you wanted to create a school around a particular specialist, do those rules have an impact? What's the answer to that question? No, they don't. It's the people within your organisation that have the biggest impact. So our barrier isn't the rules and regulations in terms of creating a school for a specialist cohort such as gifted. It's actually the barrier is the people. All right, I feel like I need to ask more about that. And it's around people's understanding of what they're doing. So it's about chanting a story as you go. So with a, you know, governing board, the one thing I've learned is you have to say the same chant every year. A bit like when new parents come, it's about having that story that you pass on, that the information that they need, you know, whether it be around how we manage things, how things operate. It's the same within a board. But if you've got different personalities on a board, and those personalities, you've got someone that's extremely visionary and someone that can only see tomorrow, you're going to have problems, you're going to have debates. So, you know, much of what I found was it was that misunderstanding. You know, people thought we were going in that direction when we were actually going there, and there were only two people going that way and the rest were going that way. That can divide what you're doing. So it's about a cohesive group of people, whether they be parents, teachers, and in this case, it was a group of teachers and parents that actually came together through frustration within the system. So, and the only other major problem we had was, you know, we knew that our students were grouped by ability. But all paperwork says year 5, how many students? And I'm like, well, how do we manage that? It drove us quite potty, I think is a very technical word. So we actually group kids based on their age base on paperwork. In the classroom, it's on ability. Because we've got to comply and put them, you don't write, we've got 100 kids all together. You've got to break them into subsections. I don't know why, but it's what we did have to do. So it was that. But most of the paperwork, you know, what is your vision? You know, what is your curriculum? Which curriculum are you going to use? Why are you going to? You're just answering the questions, really. So that's really interesting. So in terms of, you know, having schools and
variety of educational options for gifted kids. Some of the big lessons that you have discovered through your research is actually around people, you know, cohesively going in the same direction. So communication, expectations, maybe even values.
It's communications, it's their values, it's having the same vision, because when your vision becomes unclear, people don't know direction. Having strong leadership, you know, because if someone's leading at the front, whether it be the chair, then that's when things happen. You know, if everybody is working cohesively, you actually move faster. It's when it becomes fractured, things slow down for whatever reason. People are scared. Oh, you know, the school's going to open. I don't know if I want to be part of this anymore.
Because change is scary, isn't it?
Change is scary. Big decisions are scary. You know, do we buy the school? Don't we buy the school? Do we move to this site or do we move to that site? Because everyone has this internal belief that if we make the wrong decision, it will be my fault. But they don't actually, nobody actually said that, but that's what you could feel from, you know, I've got to leave now. I'll be back in 12 months. After the big decision's made. And this is just human nature. It is that change. And, you know, like I said in another podcast, you know, it's about being that reformist. It's about daring to do something different. But have I done it different? I've modelled it on all of the good practices, things that have happened overseas, best research, putting it all into place. And sometimes things don't quite work. And we just keep revamping. But, you know, with the facilities we've got now, it's just beautiful. I go to work every day and I actually enjoy going to work. You know, the last 10 years is just, that's what I enjoy, is coming to work. Up until then, it was a job. Now this is a passion.
Absolutely. And so, I don't know, this is a big open question. That's probably going to be hard to answer, but what have you learned most in this journey? What was the biggest lesson, do you think, in creating from scratch, from an idea around table in the canteen, let's be radical and create a school for gifted kids, to today, if we're 5 years in, you've got a beautiful building, you've got almost 60 kids, 70 next year, wonderful team.
I think it's about perseverance. There are so many times I wanted to give up. But I didn't. Why didn't I? Because there were people around me. And it was about the vision. You know, we wrote the vision. I think we embedded the vision. We lived and breathed that vision. And it was that vision that gives that momentum to what you're doing. And, you know, you just need one person going in that direction. And it's surprising how many actually follow. You know, they either agree with you or they don't. If they disagree with you, they say, you know, justified why. And we went, oh, we need to slightly alter the course, and that's okay. So it's about, whilst you're moving forward, it's actually listening to what's going on around you. But I think if I was to do it again, I would actually have a team that was dedicated just for looking for a building, and have a team dedicated to curriculum, and another one dedicated to policy. So each little team had a particular function, but we all did everything together.
So that's an interesting lesson in terms of moving forward. So if we move out, you know, in our perspective, and actually I might pause the podcast to let my dog out the room before she barks again. All right, and we're back. The dog has exited the room. So what I wanted to ask then is, zooming out from school level, if you're going to change anything in policy or legislation to help gifted kids within, you know, our current education system, what would you do? What do you feel needs to be done? Big question.
It is a big question. I think it's about educating teachers in general, about gifted education. I know Flinders University now has a compulsory topic for a semester on gifted ed.
Yeah.
I think that needs to happen. I think more universities need to offer that, because they do disability.
Yeah.
But I think teachers are quite, what I see are generalists. It's like going to your local GP. They're generalist, but they send you off to a specialist.
Yeah.
So here's this group of teachers. They know that this child is different, but they don't actually know why.
They need a bit more knowledge.
They need more knowledge.
Yeah.
So whether it is sending them off to a specialist or having a bit more grounding to be able to go, this kid's different, or this child needs, a faster pace, would help with that inclusive education. I think South Australia doesn't have a gifted policy as such, whereas all the other states do. But people don't actually work with policy very well. There are schools that have gifted programs, but what do they look like? What do they mean? It's about doing valuation. So, I'm not one for government politics, but I think they allowed it. The way it's set up, anyone can start a gifted school. Yeah. Anyone could start a school for underwater scuba diving. But as long as it's clear, precise, has the policies, it can be done. I just don't think, gifted education doesn't get any funding. Yeah. If you're disability, you do. But I think in general, to be honest, I think public needs more funding across the board, not just gifted. I think we need funding across the board for all schools to make that inclusive practice. Yeah. So, whilst I'm in a very specialist niche, I still support any other school that comes to me and asks for help. I'm quite happy to sit down and write a plan. I've worked with somebody from Queensland where we've discussed what this child needs, how you go about it. It'd be great if we had someone in each government sector, well, especially in South Australia, someone you could actually go to that was a gifted person, specialist to help with those difficult questions. So, people tend to go to, gifted associations, or they'll ring the school asking for support and help. And I'm quite happy to do that. Yeah. That's not a problem. That's what we're about. If I can help a gifted child somewhere, that's what it's about. Yeah. But I think funding across the board for all schools, both public and private. Yeah.
Yeah, and look, it often does come down to more money, doesn't it? More money, and then you get to train teachers, and then you get to have support, and like you say, specialists out there who can actually look at a particular case and understand how everything impacts everything else, and just get that support and knowledge. And
because gifted education isn't black and white, even when it comes to identified children, putting programs together, it's not, I can pull that off the shelf. Yeah. Because each child is completely different and will require a different program. Yeah. I don't think I've got too many kids that are on the same program, traveling the same journey within the school. Yeah. And that's just something different. Yeah. It's just what we are and what we do.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so in terms of legislation and policy, I think what we've kind of talked about here is definite need for more funding and support for teachers. Yeah. That need for universities to include training for gifted ed in terms of their pre-service teachers. Yeah. And it sounds like new schools need support to find buildings. Yeah. Do you know, I mean, if someone's wanting to start a school, particularly in a niche like this where there is a real need, I don't know if there was you know, if the challenge is at council level, more awareness at that level, or just something so that they're not falling over at this last hurdle of actually just finding somewhere to put bums on seats.
You know, the state was really good. They actually stopped and had a look at what they had available.
Yeah.
You know, when I went to the local council, they actually dug to see what buildings were around in the area that weren't being utilised. So people,
there was a lot of support.
There was a lot of support, you know, and it was, you know, I have to say the Marion Council and the Marion Mayor rose to the challenge. They actually went above and beyond.
I wonder if that was key to you getting across the line, whereas others didn't. Do you know, like, you never know, but I wonder.
We'll never know. But I think, you know, getting people out to visit and getting people to talk to you is another part of the puzzle. You know, people know that you exist, but it's not until you invite them in and they actually experience what goes on in the classroom. You know, I've had, you know, different politicians have come in and they're just, I think they're blown away when they leave. And that sends us a very strong message that, you know, hey guys, you should be supporting this. You know, even if it is the Minister for Environment, it doesn't really matter.
No, it doesn't.
It's about,
it could be the Minister for Education one day.
I've spoken to shadow ministers. I've spoken, so it's about getting your message out. You know, and I think it's when, as we got confidence in banging on doors and actually asking, hey, do you know, or do you have? People say no, but it's really surprising. You get a funny phone call 3 months later, just after Christmas, where a soft voice says, I think I found a building. And you go, okay, is this person pulling my leg? No, they're actually for real. You know, you go out for coffee, you get talking and you build relationships. So, you know, to this day, you know, I think the Marion Council is probably one of the most supportive, dynamic councils that I've come across.
Well, excellent. And we've been lucky to have them on our side to get across the line in the end. Because look at what beautiful things are happening, you know, for those kids who have found their way there and found their happy place. So thank you very much for talking to us today a bit about policy and change and the journey of opening a school for gifted kids. And I look forward, you know, in the not too distant future, I hope to be calling you, you know, Dr. Lynda McInnes. So that's not too far away.
Well, the kids are already calling me Professor. Doctor's not good enough.
They're onto it.
Anyway.
Well, that might be prophetic then. Well, thank you very much. Really appreciate your time.
Not a problem.